Hey everybody, OperationZ here today, and today we're going to talk about Moses, the man of God. And basically, long story short, Moses was the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter, and he was originally Jewish, and he came from the Jews that dwelt in the land of Goshen at that time, and they weren't letting the men children live because they were oppressing Israel, and they were going to enslave them where they were once welcome in that land in the days of Joseph. And basically, long story short, that he ends up going to be a part of the land of Goshen, or he goes to be a part of, being that royalty of Pharaoh's daughter that, raised up as a prince amongst the Egyptians. And read this here, Exodus 3:1. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. So that's the first part here. He fled because he killed the Egyptian taskmaster, like basically one of the people that was over the Jews that were enslaving them, and beaten one of them with a whip, and he looked this way and that way, and then he killed the Egyptian that was oppressing the Jew. And then, basically, out of fear of being found out in that, he fled and dwelt in the land of Midian. And when he dwelt in the land of Midian, he comes across Jethro, his father in law, and he marries a wife there. And he forgets all the toil and the rough things that happened there in Egypt. And continuing on, so reading that again. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. So he was there. He was over there in Midian. And it's worth noting that, he had it pretty good there, that he was as a prince amongst the people of Egypt because he was the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter. And where he was the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter, that, basically he had a lot going for him there, but he chose rather his own people, and he was compassionate and cared about the suffering that they went through there. And he, knowing that they were his brethren, he didn't want to stand by and watch it. So he did what he did there, and then he fled to Midian. So Exodus 3:2, and the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was consumed. And when the bush was consumed, he saw that it was of God, the miracle of God, and God called him to free his people. And at first he was afraid to do it, and he said, I'm a man of slow speech and of a slow tongue, and God still ended up using him anyway, but also with his brother Aaron, used him too as for a mouthpiece for this. And basically, long story short, Moses is the one that's called to do it, and with the great and mighty hand and the finger of God, that he leads Israel out of the land of Egypt. and their harsh bondage. So continuing on, Hebrews 11:27, by faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, as seeing him who is invisible. So Moses was a very bold man. He didn't fear Pharaoh when God called him to bring his people out of that harsh bondage. And, on top of that, he didn't fear the people, because there were times where Israel did wrong and he enforced what God wanted him to enforce upon that, like when they worshiped the golden calf and did stuff that they weren't supposed to do. That, he was just a very bold man, and he didn't fear the people. And he did the will of the Lord. And he chose rather to fear the invisible God, and the God who's there, and the God who saves, with reverencing fear. So Acts 7:22, and Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and deeds. So Moses was very wise. He knew all the wisdom of the Egyptians and what they had to offer, being the most advanced civilization of that time. Something well worth taking note of, and just, having that knowledge. He was very knowledgeable and very wise, and schooled in all the schooling that Egypt had to offer. And for many reasons, God chose him to be the one to deliver Israel out of their suffering. So Deuteronomy 18:18, I will raise them up a prophet like unto thee, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. So where Moses does this, the important thing to take into consideration here is basically that Moses is a foreshadowing that points to Jesus, because he intercedes for the people when they've done wrong, and God was so angry with Israel for worshiping the golden calf and doing these things in rebellion against him, breaking that commandment to have no other gods before them, that he was going to kill them. And Moses said, God, far be that from you. Remember your servants Jacob and Isaac and Abraham. And God was going to start over with Moses as a new people and just do it over again. But God listened to Moses' intercession, and upon listening to Moses' intercession, good came from that, and that basically it was God's forgiveness for the people. And we see Christ, what Christ did on the cross and his atonement. It's a foreshadowing into what happens well into the future, way later on. But brothers and sisters, that's the message for today, and you all have a blessed day.